It was a little over a year ago when I found myself standing in the middle of a swamp, in the middle of the night, surrounded by the wreckage of a plane crash. Luckily, I wasn't on the plane. It was actually a set we had built for a short film called Holdfast. And for some reason, I thought it'd be a good idea to write a film that took place in the middle of a swamp in the middle of the night, something I regretted immediately when we set foot on set, and my crew was very, very grateful for that as well. So for 2 nights, we trudged through the swamp, and one of my jobs as director is to, between takes, run over to the actor and talk to them about the scene and make adjustments, and then run back behind the camera and yell action and, directory type stuff. The only problem on this shoot was my actor was about 20 feet into the swamp on a plane wing. So I had to get into waders, and I'm just trudging along back and forth for 2 nights, just like this deep in just this disgusting swamp. And it was on one of those trips that I discovered something that I didn't know about our fair state of Georgia. And you might find this interesting, but Georgia has a very aggressively healthy population of leeches. Now, I thought leeches maybe were only in the Amazon. I guess this public school system failed me. Now, there was a second piece of information, like immediately right after that I learned as well, which is leeches have nests, which I didn't know. So leech and nest are 2 words that shouldn't go together, ever. So within, 10-second period, I come into this realization as a witch's cauldron of slimy black leeches, about yay big, are just bubbling all around me. And this is like I'm looking into the horror of the abyss, and it's staring back at me. And it's at this moment, like time freezes, like the universe opens up, and I have this out-of-body experience, and I look down and I think, what am I doing with my life? Like, what decisions have I made to get here in the middle of the swamp surrounded by just horrible monsters? And there's a thought I always go back to every time I'm in that situation, which is more often than not when we're out filming on top of mountains in the freezing cold or in swamps. And the thought that keeps me going is that I love movies. I love making movies. I love watching movies. I love everything there is about movies. And if you're like me, you love movies too. I mean, as a culture, we all go out to the movie theaters every weekend. We cram into a big square box and watch a giant screen, or maybe you pop the laptop open at home and watch it, your favorite shows or TV there, or maybe on your iPhone when you're going to the bathroom. I mean, it's just whatever. We all do it. Don't pretend like you don't. So I realized pretty soon that if I was going to be a filmmaker, as an independent filmmaker, and make movies that anyone even cared about, I was going to have to figure out what made good movies good. I was going to have to pry them open and figure out what made them tick so that I can make movies that people would enjoy. And so I spent a few years trying to figure this out, and I noticed something that started to arise out of this research, which is that all stories, most every great story, is the same story. It's a universal trend. It's a story we've been telling ourselves for thousands of years. And so I've been able to distill this basic mono story down to 4 parts, which I've modeled after John Milton's Paradise Lost, one of my favorite books. And these 4 parts are creation, fall, salvation, redemption. Creation, fall, salvation, redemption are the building blocks of every great story. So let's just hit them one by one. So the first, you have creation. And so it's the world as it was meant to be. There's harmony and peace in the universe. It's the Shire and Lord of the Rings. The Galactic Republic or whatever is doing great. The young couple are just married. They have lots of hope, and there are no aliens in the atmosphere looking down, menacing over us. Now, very quickly in the film, we go to the next section, which is the fall, where evil enters into the world and threatens menace, destruction, and death. And everything that was beautiful and awesome is now destroyed. And the Empire has taken over, and Darth Vader enters the scene. And everything gets really, really bad. And if films ended there, we would be miserable, and we'd want our money back. It would just be a really horrible movie. But luckily, it goes into the next section, which is salvation, where a hero rises up to the call to fight up against the evil forces. And it's kind of the same archetype. It's Harry Potter and Luke Skywalker and Frodo and Neo and pretty much every single hero movie that you've seen, superhero movie, the last 10 years, all 10,000 of them. And they usually defeat the evil at great cost to themselves and often at cost of their own lives. And once that evil is defeated, we enter into the last part, which is the part we all love, which is redemption. And redemption is basically things go back to the way they once were. And all the wrongs are righted, evil is punished, justice reigns, and we find ourselves just absolutely feeling great when the movie ends. The end, roll credits, go home, it's awesome. And that's the same story, and it's the same story we keep telling ourselves as a culture. Now, a culture is known by the stories they tell themselves, the stories that they repeat over and over again. And so I realize that we're telling ourselves the story of redemption over and over again. And really the basic concept is things are broken and should be fixed, and someone needs to fix them. That's really kind of the basis of these films. So we go every week and every day and we consume these stories, but at the same time, there's this discrepancy in how we act day to day. And I think, I'm trying to figure out, why do we keep going back to the same well? Why do we love this story? And I think it's because once we're done with the film or the show or whatever the story is, we have this good story buzz, and we just love it. We feel great about everything. And over time, it starts to go away and we sober up, and we kind of know deep down that life isn't like that. No matter how much we wish it was, evil doesn't always get punished, and justice doesn't always reign. And bad things happen, and there is no resolution. And so that kind of wears us down, and then we just want to go back to the stories again. It's like this cathartic experience. We want to keep revisiting over and over again. So I sat down with our filmmakers at Whitestone, and we sat around trying to figure out, what does this mean? What is this cultural dichotomy, and what are we going to do about it? What could we possibly interact with? And so we came up with a challenge to ourselves, and we called that challenge the third hour. And the concept is simple. What if we believed the story we were telling? So for 2 hours, we go to the movies and we watch the film and we get all excited, but what are we doing when the film ends? What are we doing in that third hour? I feel like that third hour is probably the most important. And do we buy into this story that we love so much? So that was a challenge that we gave to ourselves to figure out, what does that mean for us? And it was unique to Whitestone, and it's unique to us, and it's different for everybody. But I'll give you an example of something that we did at Whitestone. A few years ago, I learned that Atlanta was one of the worst cities in the country for child sex trafficking. Nearly 300 girls a month are sold for sex under the age of 18. It took a really dark turn, didn't it? You didn't see that coming. All right. All right, we're gonna get through it. It's all right. So that's the kind of information that when it gets stuck in your head, you can't shake it. It's there now, and that's what you have to kind of deal with. And I'm just thinking through it. I live right down the street from Atlanta. It's in my backyard. It's happening all around us. So what are we going to do? And we felt hopeless, and we felt helpless, and we felt like there was nothing. Again, we challenged ourselves to figure out, what is that unique to us that we can contribute? How do we figure out how to meld what we do and actually tangibly affect the real world? So in a mixture of what was probably stupidity and bravery, we tried to figure out what a film would be for us. And we don't do documentaries. I make weird films. I make weird fairy tale type movies and folklore and John Henry movies. So we wrote a story called The Candy Shop, which is a fairy tale about the sexual exploitation of children. Now, if you're wondering if the words, a fairy tale about the sexual exploitation of children, looks good on a business plan for fundraising, the answer is no. It looks awful, and it's very difficult to raise funds. But luckily, we met up with some great partners, some brave, innovative partners like 12 Stone Church and Street Grace, and we were able to get the film made. And the story is simple. It's about a man who kidnaps little girls off the street, and he puts them into a machine and turns them into candy, and then he sells them on the street to other men. And just obviously to serve as a metaphor for objectifying these people and selling people like objects. So we got to premiere the film at the Fox Theater, and we got to launch a campaign citywide called Stop the Candy Shop. And that night was really about not just watching this film, but about raising awareness, raising funds, but most importantly, raising interest in people to volunteer, to actually get involved with this issue, to tangibly affect the world around them. And to this day, the candy shop is still going years later, and it's still raising funds and awareness and doing really exciting things. And it was something that we gave to Street Grace and said, just go do with what you will. And so far, it's been a great experience. And that's just one example of what we've done. We've tried to figure out how do we interact with people even in our basic lives. How do we interact with people on film shoots? How do we make films in a unique, different way? We have something called the Protégé Program, where we invite students from all over the country to come in for free, and we train them over the course of a year, just to give back, to give people opportunities that they normally wouldn't have. So that's unique to us. I'm not thinking anybody else could do the film type stuff and the weird type stuff, but the question I have is, what are you doing in your third hour? Like, what is something that's unique to you and that only you can do? And hopefully it's weird and strange, because that's what makes it great. And so what is this weird, strange, or maybe unique thing that you could actually be doing to affect redemption in the real world? A culture is known for the stories they tell. And we keep telling ourselves a story of redemption, which means somehow, we actually want it to be true and we believe it. And so you have to ask yourself the question is, do you believe this story? The story that we keep telling ourselves. And if you do something about it. Thank you.